There's a lot going on in the world. It's happening at an ever faster pace, it seems. In fact, my next guest has been saying this for a while. Terry Sawchuk from Sawchuk Wealth in Southeast Michigan. He says we're going to see more changes in this 10-year period than we have in 10,000 years of human development. And as fast as things are going, I find that to be credible, to say the least. Terry, good to have you back.
Good morning, Steve.
Good to have you here. So, we were talking about this in the break. I think one of the things that is so difficult for many of us, and we talk about it a lot here on this program, I do, and that is, who do you trust in the media? I mean, honestly, you've got the corporate media that says this, and you've got somebody that says that, and you've got people that say, well, Putin is a monster and he's evil, which could very well be true. But Ukraine's a hero. I don't know that that's true. You know, there's a lot of corruption in Ukraine. And then people come back to, well, they're killing civilians in Ukraine. Well, it's the fog of war. It's hard to find credible sources, and you can't just latch on, well, this is true and that's that. You know, there's just so much. And who do we trust anymore, whether it's the war or anything else, Terry?
It's difficult, Steve, because it seems to me that, things like Twitter, Facebook, and others have become the playground for military-level psychological operations. And so it's impossible for us to know. And I think it's probably better to try to remain neutral and then, kind of take a step back. From an investment standpoint, we have systems that take the emotion out of everything, so we don't get caught up in these whipsaws and other things. And I think that's just good in general for people's mental well-being, because we're being manipulated. We don't know the truth. We're probably not going to know the truth until this plays out. On the Russia front, I would say it's when the entire media complex gets one-sided like it is, it makes me a little bit dubious, because that's what happened with COVID. And as we can see right now, all the conspiracy theories that were called conspiracy theories are essentially turning out to be true, right? So that makes me skeptical.
I agree with that. When the entire media complex, I think you called it the Western media complex, gets into one single narrative, and you must believe this and you must follow that, mm-hmm. It should be a red flag. And that's not to say that Vladimir Putin's a good guy. He's not. I mean, he's proven that over time, whether he was invading Georgia or taking Crimea or whatever it might be. I don't think Xi Jinping is a good guy. I think that,
is Joe
harvesting
Biden a
organs
good
from
guy?
the Uyghurs is a bad deal.
Hey,
Joe Biden doesn't know who he is. So that I don't know if he's anything. He's just
Donald
there.
Trump a good guy? I mean, I think he was.
Insofar as
a lot of people don't.
We didn't invade Nova Scotia, all right? We weren't harvesting organs in South Dakota. I mean, I could just say that part, all right? And Donald Trump wasn't.
Fair.
In fact, he got us in no wars. Donald Trump got us in no wars, right?
Right. I agree, but I would argue that it depends on which side of the fence you're sitting on. Every nation. So this is what I think is going on, Steve, is that we are watching the fall of globalization to some degree. And, from an economic standpoint, we learned from COVID that we were too dependent on external supply chains. And that not only was an economic problem, but it ultimately became a national security problem, right? So now we're starting to see that Russia, in their fight with Ukraine, their invasion of Ukraine, that's highlighted energy security problems, more so for Europe, but it's going to create energy shortages throughout the world, which creates price increases and causes economic pain. So we're going to see this, and I think Russia is just trying to decouple from the rest of the Western world, and I think they'll be successful because they have the ability to do two things: provide their own food and provide their own energy. And if you can do that, you really don't need the rest of the world for much of anything else. And I think that's exactly
well. From that perspective, though, I would respectfully disagree, because outside of Moscow and a couple of the major cities, which are basically oases, Russian people are dirt poor today. If they had the ability to feed themselves and to have all of these things, well, right, it's always been that way. But yet they have more natural resources than any country on the planet, more than America. The one piece of dirt, because it's bigger, that has more because they have gold, they have oil, they have natural gas, not as good as ours. But yet they live in abject poverty, many of them.
But the question is not poverty, Steve. The question is, are they happy? And I'll
have
tell
no
you
idea.
this. Well, what I think, I don't know either. But what I can tell you is I think this media propaganda around the people in Russia overthrowing Putin. It's not going to happen. Putin is as popular there as anybody, any leader probably anywhere in the world. Maybe not so much with the under 30s, but with the 30 plus, he's a very popular guy. And obviously he controls the media, so there's an element to that there. But this idea that he's going to get overthrown from within, I don't think it's going to happen. And anybody that's buying into that right now, I think you're going to be disappointed with the outcome.
Not by the people be overthrown, but he could certainly be overthrown by.
Not by anybody.
You never, in the inside circle, if that happened, I don't know that anybody would be surprised. Maybe you would be. I'm not sure I would be. In fact, I wouldn't be.
I would be surprised.
That's the way these things work. He's 70 years old. He's at the back end of his dictatorial lifestyle and lifespan. I mean, that's kind of, dictators kind of run out of steam at some point and somebody else takes over. Dog eat dog world out there, right? But it doesn't change what you and I are talking about. Here we are, comparing notes about, you've read this, I've read this, I've read this. There's not a place that you or I or anybody can go that we can always say, yep, they got that right, yep, they got that right, because you're right, there's a narrative, there's propaganda. And it comes from Russia, it comes from Ukraine, it comes from China, it comes from the United States, it comes from NATO. And here's the other thing, now NATO beefing up for their one line. Now Finland, very close to joining NATO, would be. There's 190 countries in the world. 30 of them belong to NATO currently. 31 if Finland joins, which it sounds like they're going to, and Switzerland might even join. It's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. I hope that when this all plays out, obviously tensions settle down, and I think they will at some point, but we're just in a new era. And I think what you're going to find is that a lot of countries, like Germany's a good example, increasing their defense spend to more than 3% of GDP since the first time since World War II, right? You're going to see Argentina not going to ship food out anymore. I think you're going to see more of an every man for themselves mentality for a little while as we all struggle to figure out how can we make our own countries and our own resources more robust so that we don't have to rely on these external things. When we made the supply chains efficient, we also made them weaker.
So when we say America first, then that's the way the rest of the world is going to go. That was Donald Trump's idea, obviously, of his vision of the world. But when you talk about the world changing faster in 10 years, we're talking about, being looked at, watched, passports for travel on your phone and all of these things, your vaccine passports, all of these things looking at us constantly. And that's happening at the same time. We got about 30 seconds here, Terry. Tell me what you think.
Well, the thing that concerns me, Steve, and we keep talking about this, are the central bank digital currencies. That's where this is all leading, right? If you have a United Nations or a WHO that has control over sovereign nations' ability to deal with vaccines and pandemics and things like that. And then on top of that, you have global central bank digital currencies where they have a complete surveillance state and individually programmable money. They control everything, right? And technology is moving fast enough. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Chamath from Facebook wanted to start his own militia from within Facebook. Think about that. They basically wanted their own army, and they talked about it.
Hold 1 second. I want to go to break, and I want to bring you back. You got a minute more, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. We'll take a quick break on the Steve Gruber Show. Back with Terry after this. All right, so here's where we want to crack in now. All right, we want to crack this egg. We want to talk about the Davos crowd, the World Economic Forum. These people with obscene amounts of wealth, right, that can play puppet master with a lot of different folks. That's what Terry was starting to head down that road. Terry Sawchuk, I want to continue because you talk about these people with immense amounts of wealth and power and resources and the ability to come in. We know what Zuckerberg did with $300 million, give or take, to impact specific Democrat counties and specific states to turn the election. We know what he did with messaging to make sure that they impacted as many people as possible to turn Trump toxic and Joe Biden is, soft and cuddly. They did that, we know, by messaging, right, relentlessly. They blocked out bad messaging about Hunter Biden and his laptop. But you say in the World Economic Forum and Davos and these people, world global oligarchs, it's bigger and worse than that, right?
Sure. Again, it's pretty clear that we're getting military level psychological operations in social media. Okay. There's just no two ways about it. So you have to assume, and where did that come from? I don't know. I mean, it's coming from all over because we don't filter out who gets access to that. How is it that, tell me this, Steve, how is it that Vladimir Putin still has a Twitter account, but Donald Trump doesn't? I mean, that makes zero sense. It's the stupidest thing. What's happening is you're getting this combination of elites in powerful places that run places like Facebook, Twitter, Google, Apple, others. They're working with the government, and they're doing the government's work. Larry Fink from BlackRock just said that we have to force behavior change. What the hell is that? Why does BlackRock
force
have to
behavior change? Yeah, if we don't behave, they'll crack us across the wrist or a much worse. I want to share an excerpt from my new desk reference book. This is America in Our Own Words by Steve Gruber.
I love it.
A collection of really good quotes. You'll love it. Don't worry, your signed copy is coming, Terry. Well, we're getting a whole bunch of them. But I want to read you a quote, because that's what there's a book of quotations that can sit on your desk when you're looking for inspiration about America and American general. We are free today substantially, but the day will come when our republic will be an impossibility. It will be an impossibility because wealth will be concentrated in the hands of a few. A republic cannot stand upon bayonets, and when the day comes when the wealth of the nation will be in the hands of a very few, then we must rely upon the wisdom of the best elements in the country to readjust the laws of the nations to the changed conditions. So wrote James Madison, father of the Constitution. When all of the money is concentrated into the hands of a few powerful that can create these illusions, that can do these psychological operations, that can put their thumb on the scale of an election, that can do all of these things, not just here, but globally now because of the way we're connected, Terry. That's kind of what you're talking about.
Well, it is, except that on a national level, like you just described, you could see it happening in the United States. But look, it happens in every country, right? It's the same thing in Russia with the oligarchs. It's the same thing pretty much anywhere in Europe. And so when you have that, they have the power to control, except now what's happening is the goal is bigger. It's not to dominate the United States, it's to dominate the world. And this idea that we're going to centralize power, I mean, there are people that are literally talking about right now having the WHO to have more power than any individual sovereign nation. And it's the perfect cover because, viruses don't know where borders are. They cross whenever they want. And so it's the perfect excuse for a power grab. And what do you do when you want to grab power? You scare people into thinking that's their only option, right? And it's the same thing with digital currency. Well, we might not scare people in that sense, but what we might do is make it so easy and convenient because people have become so lazy and, so easy to manipulate that they just go along with it, or it happens in the dark. And by the time anybody figures out the actual ramifications, it's too late. Look, Steve, this is the bottom line. Elections have consequences. And what we're dealing with right now is a bunch of money, well, power hungry, I would say. Money is a secondary, element of that. But power hungry people who keep grabbing more control. You tell me why in California, Gavin Newsom needed to extend his emergency powers. The pandemic's over. I mean, by and large, it's done. So why do they need to do that? And why are we wearing masks anywhere in the United States at all right now? You tell me.
Ever. In fact, I had to put one on. I had to see a dentist. This is still required. And the dentist is like, the rules appear that they're a medical facility. If you don't wear a mask in a medical facility, they can lose their license. Why would that be? Doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're right. The pandemic's over. It's been over for a long time for a lot of people. And so it's hard to understand why they keep pushing this narrative when most of us are done, exhausted, over it.
It's easy.
Right?
Yeah, the answer is easy because what's happened is what we've done is we've created a massive bureaucratic state where now you've got places like, in this case, Fauci's NIH or, the CDC or any of these other entities. They're the ones that are given the power and they're unelected. So what's happened is Congress has kind of stepped aside, rerouted the rules, and they've done it at the national level and they do it at the state level, just like Whitmer did. She went around the Supreme Court and went to the health department to basically to make it so that these businesses couldn't circumvent their draconian rules. This is centralized power, Steve, and this is what we need to get away from. We need to decentralize what we're doing. And elections have consequences. And so you got to look at who you're voting for and look at their track record and go, do these people look like they're serving the best interest of the, of the people based on crushing the economy?
Or serving their own interest.
That's
exactly
serving their
right.
own
interest. Exactly right. Terry, I got to leave it right there. Good conversation. It's the kind of conversation we need to have. Because,
I love
again,
it, buddy.
We're flooded with information that comes from who knows where, with what credibility, right? And so we need to continue to sort it out. What's that?
Yeah. As the technology is only getting better. So the ability and the ease of which they can do that is only going to, it's just going to increase.
That's right.
And that's
getting better or worse, depending on your perspective on that, or worse.
Right.
Terry Sawchuk, Sawchuk Wealth, Southeast Michigan. You can find out more about Terry and his work. Terry, good conversation. We'll talk soon, my friend.
Thanks, Steve. See you, buddy.
Yeah. All right, just let that all roll around. Just having a conversation. Robust conversations here on the Steve Gruber Show.